50 years ago, the Green Revolution started in the Philippines with a promise of eradicating hunger and poverty through increased rice production. However, since then, agribusinesses and research institutions have taken control of farmers' production, technologies, and seeds. The laboratory varieties did result in higher yields. But why did the farmers remain poor then? For many generations, farmers passed on their practical knowledge, especially those who had not reached or had resisted the hype of the Green Revolution. How can this traditional expertise be used to meet the challenges of climate change and hunger? How can farmers become independent of seed companies and expensive chemicals? Is the knowledge of thousands of years of farming nurtured by our farmers really useless?
Is it ready? Check it again. You must be very careful not to hurt the plant, so it can produce more seeds. Shake the flower gently. We need to roll them in paper to make sure the flowers receive enough pollen and prevent other plants from pollinating them. Every breeder has his own personal recipe for success. As students, you should keep asking questions. Don't just stand around like that. You work with the plants, but you don't ask anything. If you don't ask questions, you'll never learn the answers.
In almost every Asian language, rice means life and food. Rice is the staple food for more than half of the world's population. More than 90 million Filipinos eat rice with every meal. Large fields and fertile soils make the country a major rice producer. Nevertheless, it is also one of the largest importers of rice in the world. Should rice ever become scarce, political unrest would be unavoidable. The Green Revolution was meant to increase rice production. The air was full of hope, with a promise to eradicate poverty and hunger everywhere. Modern agricultural technology was brought into the country, quickly replacing local and traditional knowledge. So-called high-yielding varieties, developed in upscale pricey laboratories, promised higher crop yields from smaller land areas. The Green Revolutionists favored large monocultures, induced the fields with expensive fertilizers, and started using pesticides for pest control. At first, materials were frequently supplied free of charge. Elizabeth Cruzada, Organizational Development Officer of the Farmers Network MASIPAG, reports on the consequences of the Green Revolution.
After a time, during those years, the 1980s, the farmers realized that they were deeply in debt already. No, because why? Because the fertilizers were costing a lot more, out of reach of the poor farmers, and their varieties were used to these fertilizers. So that meant that they couldn't grow, they couldn't yield without those fertilizers, and those fertilizers couldn't be had without borrowing from the traders. So what happened after a time was that the traders were really earning more, profiting from the whole business of the Green Revolution, and the farmers found out that not only was their fields changed, but that also they had lost the knowledge. They had lost the knowledge of their grandfathers and their fathers in growing the rice.
Scores of farmers lost their land to creditors, prompting a large-scale exodus into the cities. Almost 50% of the Philippine population lives on the brink of or below poverty levels. Close to a quarter of families depend on their children's labor for income. A number of those who stayed behind changed their lives. They organized, put their efforts together. They strived for independence, not willing to annually buy crop seeds from the large supplier companies. More than 20 years ago, they founded MASIPAG. Nowadays, more than 35,000 families are attached to this network, spreading across the entire country.
The first principle of MASIPAG is people first before profit. The seeds are the products of generations of farmers, so nobody really owns it. No, so we don't sell the seeds, no. And the farmers, it is a first principle also that they want, that MASIPAG farmers really believe that the rice, because all of us, the Filipinos, eat rice, and it is not only those who can afford it must be able to access our rice. So organic rice is for everyone. MASIPAG rice is for everyone.
Under scientific guidance, MASIPAG farmers were able to regain knowledge forgotten by their parents during the Green Revolution. Independent cultivating of crops. One of the most remarkable farmer breeders is Pepito Babasa. His varieties are held in high regards among MASIPAG farmers.
I was able to grow 25 crosses, along with 100 varieties ready for developing and sowing by other farmers. Take this one, type PB418. Farmers told me of its flood resilience. It's predestined for coastal regions because farmers around the coasts are frequently hit hard by typhoons.
Kaya po, hindi lang siguro ako makapagkapatunay yung mga farmers na kumukuha ng variety.
In close proximity to coastal lines, farmers are directly exposed to the whims of nature. During heavy storms, there are very few things able to protect the rice fields from salt water. Fred Manimba, a MASIPAG farmer from Calabanga, tells a tale of a multitude of crop fields lost during the past years.
Back then, there used to be a rice field just over there, 500 meters over there. It went up to here, not even a stone's throw away. Farmers used to plow their fields over here, towards where we stand now. The farmers cut down trees to increase their crop yields, so there's none left. The land was left without protection. Without the trees, the water floods the fields during crop season, just like that. Each year, the ocean claims more and more land. So we started building dams. Everyone pitches in, filling sand barriers. We even grew MASIPAG varieties able to survive saltwater flooding. We looked for step-by-step solutions, because once the water has flooded everything, there's nothing you can do. We need these rice fields. Our families depend on them.
Fred also grows flood and saline-tolerant MASIPAG rice varieties. Each year, he plants a number of rice varieties, as do other farmers, for research purposes. They then come together and observe which variety is best suited for their specific conditions.
This is where I dry the rice seeds to prepare them for my research plot. We have many varieties. These over here are all Pepitos.
Fred is well aware of the risk a heavy typhoon bears for him and his crop. Therefore, he can't rely solitarily on the rice crops.
Here we have a local chicken breed called Agon. We restarted breeding them as they're highly disease-resistant and are high in body mass. The meat is very tasty. You can even fry the small ones quite well.
I'm a weather forecaster of the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration here in the Philippines. So, welcome to my office. This is the weather forecasting section of Babasa. Please. So as we can all see, this is the weather forecasting section of Babasa. This is where all the action takes place during the tropical cyclones or just about any other ordinary day here in the Philippines. Now, of course, we all know that one of the very dominant issues around today is more on the climate change now. Let's say, for example, during the months of August and September, tropical cyclones are supposed to cross the northern part of the country. Instead of crossing the northern part of the country, they veered away from the country. One went towards the Taiwan area, the other one went towards the southern island of Japan. In the Philippines, we have some sort of shortage or water crisis. Some of the water reservoirs didn't receive enough rainfall during the first half of the year. It's because of the El Niño event.
Mga 3 buwan na ako akong hindi nakakapanguli ng isda. Gawa ng
For the past 3 months, I wasn't able to go out fishing anymore due to the lake's recent drought, leaving the water area too small to use.
tubig dyan sa lake.
Additionally, the water hyacinths make it hard to cross. Luckily, I can grow rice crops instead.
Habang walang hindi ako
Those of us who live only off fishing go out on the lake all night long without sleep.
dito sa
They often hardly make $1, making it hard for them to feed their families.
El Niño years are dry years, La Niña wet years.
nagtsatsaga sila dyan sa na kung kumita sila, magdamag yun, walang tulugan. Minsan, nakaka 50 pesos, minsan hindi pa maabot. Minsan naman, para naman silang may gitsandaan. Kaya tsaga sila dahil wala silang mapagkunan ng ibang pambuhay ng pamilya.
Rice farmers too feel the consequences of climate change. An increase in mean night temperatures of no more than 1 degree Celsius, 2 degrees Fahrenheit, causes reduction in rice crop yields of up to 10%. A considerable contribution to greenhouse emissions also results from the use of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers in conventional farming techniques. Their production is costly in terms of energy usage, also emitting nitrous oxides during its degeneration in the soil. Nitrogen-based fertilizers are responsible for 2% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions. Dr. Flaviana Hilario, head of the Climatology and Agrometeorology Department of Babasa, further illustrates the impacts of the climate change of the Philippines.
Sea level. And the Philippines is an archipelagic country, and we have one of the longest coastal area. and many people live in the coastal area. So we have seen that the extreme events is getting, how do you call this, more extreme, and also more frequent. And this, we say that these are already manifestation of a changing climate.
Typhoons carry water for agriculture, forests, people and hydroelectricity to the islands. They are both a blessing and a curse, also causing floods, erosion and disasters. Lucio Gurango from Real, Quezon, in the eastern part of Luzon, is one of the many hit hard by the forces of nature. He grows rice and runs a crab farm. In 2004, Typhoon Winnie destroyed his town in floods and landslides. Along with Infanta and Nakar, towns close to his, over 600 lives were claimed that day. Elizabeth Cruzada visits him regularly. He tells the story of the typhoon on their way to his crab farm.
The river had flooded the whole town of Real, so the jeepney had to come back. At about 8:20, we heard people cry out, "Help, help!" The floods were rising. Huge tree trunks floating around across the whole town. Our house was elevated, so people from the ice factory fled up our hillside towards it. They said their machine room was entirely flooded. I heard cries for help from numerous people, but we couldn't do anything. Night was falling, and it got dark quickly. We couldn't see a thing. The cries gradually fell silent. Eventually, the water line started to recede. We saw people by the riverbank with flashlights in their hands. They were looking for their families and their perished loved ones. Mang Torgo, also a MASIPAG member, was amongst those crying for help. He, his wife and his child were inside their house when it was swept away by the